Doom Eternal. This past week we got our first glimpse at the game, and Alex, we have to talk about some Doom Eternal today.
It's the only thing I want to talk about, John.
Yeah, same here. We're both huge fans of Doom 2016 and really Doom in general, so I kind of wanted to hold a discussion like this just to reflect back on what we've seen thus far last week. So to begin with, I guess we're looking at id Tech 7.
Yeah.
I did see a lot of surprise over the version change though, but really it's basically a throwback to the way it has always done things.
Yeah, that's the place where I'm curious about. I mean, obviously the numbered iteration is basically something that's just comes from the old days.
Exactly.
I imagine it's not going to be so wholly different than what we saw in Wolfenstein, the New Colossus, which was already, according to post by, I think, Thiago Souza on Twitter before TNC came out, he said it was more different in code base than id Tech 5 to id Tech 6. So TNC was already a pretty different iteration of what we saw in Doom 2016, and I imagine this is going to be just even more different than that. But from what I'm seeing so far, from the visual level, it looks a lot like what we've already seen in TNC, and that's obviously not a bad thing because that game is gorgeous.
Yeah, that's the thing is, essentially it seems like they're applying a lot of those techniques to Doom, and some of the techniques as well have come over. So geometry is one of the most significant differences I'm seeing, like just the size, scale, and the density of the maps. Like there's scenes where there's just like little corpses like all nestled in the corner that are all fully modeled, where I'm sure in Doom that would just be more of a textured thing, or like sort of some light meshes in there, which again, that's more consistent I think with TNC, where they had a lot of very high density maps in there that were extremely impressive. Not to mention I see a lot of improved texture work in the mix, and things like the liquid simulation. You remember the water system from TNC?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know how much of it was based on that. I don't think it's so at all, but it really reminded me of the water in Crysis 3 a lot. And then seeing it in TNC where it even looked better, it's pretty awesome. I think it even has like a caustic simulation like the one in Crysis 3 has as well. It's pretty gorgeous. And then this time around, like you were saying, it's not just water, it's pools of blood.
Exactly. And it's a nice touch because the Doom 2016 didn't really explore that area of visual design.
No, not at all. Like these organic things we're used to seeing on Earth is so often, but since that was on Mars, there's no pools of water hanging around too often.
Exactly. So in general, I mean, the basic makeup then, it appears more detailed overall. The texture work is better, especially on things like, you just notice the weapons, for instance, which looked good in Doom, as you said, but, you know, it's definitely an improvement.
I think in terms of geometric detail, there's like the levels themselves also have like just like more dense meshes in them as well, and more diversity of meshes, but even the character models have some pretty impressive differences. Like looking at this former human here, you can see how the individual teeth are modeled in this version of Doom Eternal, and in comparison to Doom 2016, where there was definitely like a great amount of texture variety and detail on the models themselves, but they were a little bit low poly, honestly, and I always thought that was because they were just trying to get the game to 60 FPS on consoles. But this time they're just ramping it up. Or even on Doom Guy's arm, like in the first game, the arm model's awesome looking, and you see it all the time when you're playing. But now they even added all these little doodads to it. It's got the blade, you know. Mm-hmm. They're just spending all this geometry on things we've seen before and making them look better.
Yeah, absolutely. They've also done that sort of damage system to the different enemies, where it seems like you can sort of punch holes in them. They take more visible damage than they did in Doom 2016, I think.
I'm a big fan of this as well, because I liked the kind of visual feedback you got from enemies in Doom, with them like moving around and like falling over and stuff after you shot them, especially the imps and the Hell Knights. But this time around, you can see every single time a shot lands, because it just like jibs little bits off of the enemy. And I'm not exactly sure how they're doing it, because you were mentioning to me earlier that it's probably very memory intensive to have individual models, like like a new model for each bit that's jibbed off of them being swapped in. So it's got to have some procedural component to it, we'd imagine, just for memory purposes. But at the same time, it's still on the same old consoles we have now. So it can't be too radically different from what we're probably used to. It's just really smartly done, I'd imagine.
Well, that's kind of, I feel like the mantra of id Tech is just do things smartly. And we saw that definitely with every game thus far that's been utilizing the engine. And this just seems like sort of the natural evolution of what they were doing before.
Yeah, and other smart things that you can see that have already been in other games before, like the volumetric rendering that was introduced in TNC, which you can see it all over this footage, either indoors, like from lights scattering through, like there's like sections of like organic bone and you can see the light scattering through it, or outdoors on Phobos with the BFG 10,000, like lighting up this massive areas like volumetric fog, and even seeing differentiation of the fog's density in certain areas, or how it's affected by shadows too, by the BFG's light not reaching the indoor sections where the Doomslayer is at certain moments. It just really adds to that atmosphere, which was already really thick in Doom 2016 with its lit and shadowed particles that looked awesome for the time. But now it's just even thicker and just laid on, and everything looks wet and gross,
which is fitting.
it's super fitting. I'm definitely reminded of those Doom 2 levels that were basically just organic mess, kind of like the wall textures would be just like look like writhing tentacles, or there'd be like stretched faces, or all these weird things. I'm definitely the game's aesthetic this time around, alongside with the technical improvements, is one that is much more calling back to Doom 1 and 2, I would say, than Doom 3. Other than character models like the Hell Knight, I think almost everything in the footage so far looked straight out of the Doom 2 era or Doom 64 era.
Yeah, it does seem to bear more of a resemblance to that specific era, and they are in fact pulling enemies directly from Doom 2 this time. But to me, it almost feels like they've sort of gained confidence, because you have to remember, Doom 2016, I was always very eager for it, and I had a lot of hope that it would be great, but a lot of people in general did not seem to think it was going to be a great game. Especially, it had a troubled development, Rage, mixed thoughts on that. And I'm sure that, they did go in pretty hard, but there was probably some apprehension happening during the development process that maybe kept them from going as far as they might have. But now they know what people want, and they seem to be more embracing just Doom in general, like classic Doom.
Yeah, just sort of the slight wackiness, but also, I mean, I'm presuming they're gonna have some like darker levels with a little bit more horror elements. The original Doom has all that as well. It's fast and dark, but it's also a little bit scary and creepy and hard. One thing that I was definitely one of the people that was apprehensive before Doom 2016 came out, because I wasn't a big fan of Rage.
Oh, yes.
And the footage they'd shown off before release was a bit slower paced.
It was.
And I think that had a lot to do with how they wanted to show the game off, how they wanted to show off its systems, because it's not super fun to show off someone darting around 360 degrees with like a mouse. It doesn't look cinematic. It doesn't look filmic. It doesn't look even visually comprehensive, because you can see in the footage that they showed off that was keyboard and mouse with the heightened FOV. It's just the visuals are all over the place as the camera's just darting everywhere and the characters moving around. But that is actually the stuff that gets me extremely hyped up for Doom, because you can see that their technical chops enable this kind of gameplay that organically flows with you being in complete control over the Doomslayer. And I think it just looks absolutely fantastic at this point. It's more Doom 2016, but all those added bits on the technical side are just kind of enhancing the gameplay even more, with the destructible, like organic parts on the enemies falling off, or perhaps the increased size of levels going into the Phobos area at the end. I don't think there's many open arena types in Doom 2016 that kind of match that size that we're seeing at the end of the Phobos level there.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, or even as the character, as the Doomslayer opens up the auto map, that looked much more like a kind of old-style Doom level at that point than Doom 2016's arenas, which are also wonderfully designed. It's just more, I think they're much more settled in right now with the tech and feeling confident about the game's design, so they can actually just embellish on it in every area possible.
One of the things that I'm really hoping that they address then is the over-reliance on arenas, which, while they did play well, I do feel, especially in the second half of Doom 2016, that they went a bit heavy on that side of things, where you essentially enter a room, they kind of lock the doors behind you,
Yes.
and then they just fill it with enemies until you've defeated a set number of them.
Yeah.
Whereas so far in this footage, it does suggest perhaps that there might be more freedom to move around the stage, and that there's just enemies existing in that space, that's how classic Doom works. You just have a level full of enemies, and obviously the requirements of doing that are different, but there are definitely scenes in here where there's just a large bunch of enemies. Like near the end here, you see just tons of dudes just standing around, like basically waiting for you to show up. Which is exactly how Doom used to be.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of elements that I think are just classic Doom in here beyond, just the aesthetics. And I'm actually curious how much they're going to be able to fulfill this desire of mine, where this transition over from Doom 1 to Doom 2 wasn't just, more enemy types and, a new weapon here or there and a new pickup here or there, but the levels themselves got decidedly bigger, and the enemy counts themselves got way, like denser. And that wasn't always perfect for the design for the midway levels of Doom 2. But in general, it played really well with the new enemy counts. And I'm curious how much they're going to be able to do that for this release of Doom Eternal, or maybe it'll come down, years down the line as this becomes more of a games as a service product, I imagine, or something like that.
Oh gosh, don't say that.
Oh god, yeah, I don't want to scare you, John. I know how much that scares you. But the thing is, we're on the same generation of consoles right now, and how much more can they squeeze out of that CPU front to kind of make those larger levels that I almost want to crave for Doom Eternal? I'm not sure how much they'll be able to do it, but just from the looks right now, it's already denser and larger than what we've seen before.
Yeah, I certainly can agree with that. And you're right. There's more enemies on screen during any single portion of this battle, I found. So you mentioned, we're still on the same consoles, obviously, but in a way, you kind of see that is a Doom 2 thing, where Doom 2 was released so shortly after the original Doom. It was still the same basic technology, and they just found ways to improve it. 100%. Not that this is necessarily directly comparable. It's a very different situation. But they've gained experience since Doom 2016. They helped work on Wolfenstein 2, which was decidedly more advanced, as we've discussed before. And I think Wolfenstein 2 is actually a little bit... I guess you could say it's like understated visually compared to Doom. Like, it's a much more monochromatic game in general. You don't get as close to the enemies. Enemies sort of hang back more. The detail is there if you look for it, but it doesn't pop out as much, where I feel like using those advantages and the advancements that they've implemented in that game, and then taking it even further with Doom Eternal, is kind of, probably part of the secret. Like, they've already probably done some of the legwork necessary to get to this point in the Wolfenstein 2.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that I actually really loved about the footage, was the kind of the garish use of colors all over the screen, especially on the Hell on Earth segments of the game, where there's all these like kind of neon signs, and things are lighting up, like the health vials on the ground are blue, and the armor is glowing green, and the shotgun shells have like a yellow tint to them. Or even things like, just like, it has a very 90s look to it all, with like the clashing colors and the purples and
Unreal,
the greens
Forsaken,
and the reds. Unreal, I know, it looks exactly, it looks like that, but it's just like with those modern graphics that are kind of just unbelievably good and just running at a smooth 60 FPS. I really think Doom Eternal is going to be a perfection of that Doom formula we saw in 2016. And I'm still hope there's some surprises for us in there regarding the technology, especially on PC, because Doom 2016's adoption of Vulkan was one of the first large games to ever adopt it. And even since, it hasn't been that much adoption right there. And it ran really well day one, even on OpenGL for NVIDIA hardware users, at least. And then as Vulkan came out, it just sailed. It's smooth. Like, I was CPU limited, and under Vulkan, not at all anymore. Smooth 120 FPS. And now that they've been sitting on Vulkan for a while now, and I imagine they're going to maybe do some more experimental things. We'll see what's happening. But Wolf TNC was Vulkan only on release, which is a pretty big deal. And seeing where they'll take that now with Doom and a more mature id Tech 7, I'd be interesting. Maybe some ray tracing features or something like that. Who knows?
That would actually be cool to see, and entirely possible given that NVIDIA has some new cards in the works.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the thing though is, we're talking about the current consoles, you're talking about the PC, but we haven't really mentioned the Switch.
Ooh, yeah.
And that's kind of a weird thing to think about because, they're pushing the engine further than ever. It looks amazing. And then, of course, at the same time, they say, hey, it's coming to Switch. I think we can agree that the ports that Panic Button did are kind of a miracle in a way.
They do such a good job.
Work.
They did, the thing is, I was just thinking, as they announced it alongside it, and there was the Panic Button tweet, I was thinking those guys are madmen.
Yes, they
or
are.
Mad women, mad whatever. Exactly. They do a lot of great work, and taking on the mantle to put a game that is decidedly more complex than Doom 1 and probably going to end up being more complex than Wolf TNC on the Switch. It's going to be pretty awesome to see. And as much as I'm not a fan of lower frame rates sometimes, I think I just love looking at the comparison and seeing what they did to make it the way it was. It's impressive stuff.
Yeah, seeing it on a handheld is kind of amazing. So what I'll be curious to see, though, is if they actually decide to continue down the path of essentially implementing all of the advanced features. Noted, volumetric lighting is ramped way up in this footage, and that's one of the things that took the most significant hit in TNC on the Switch, where they basically cut down the resolution of the voxel grid in that to the point where it was it was there, but it was pretty chunky.
That's the good word to describe it. Chunky.
And then the larger, more complex levels in that game also tended to drop to really low resolutions. I mean,
yeah,
a lot of people were throwing around 360p a lot,
and
while the game did not average at that resolution, it was generally higher than that when docked, at least.
At least, yeah.
During the scene in the courthouse with all those enemies, the New Orleans scene, those are very heavy, and yeah, it did drop down to that resolution often enough. So I guess I'm really curious to see if what kind of improvements are being made to the engine that might also help facilitate an even better Switch port, or at least make it possible.
I mean, at the end of the day, though, I think if they decided to cut some visual features that are going to end up on the larger versions of the game, I don't think it would be the worst thing ever.
I'd be okay with that.
I mean, I think a steady frame rate is something that is awesome and should be something attained for in console versions of games always. And the game's visual makeup without something like volumetrics would be hurt, obviously, but at the same time, the game's already going to be looking really awesome on a handheld, no matter what they do. Just the density and the detail and just the artwork itself. I think if they do end up making cuts, which could maybe happen, I wouldn't put it past them. It would be for the better, probably. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And again, Wolf 2 actually kind of runs slightly faster on average than Doom did. So despite the more complex rendering, it does run better.
That was exactly against my expectations. I saw those extremely denser levels and the AI counts and everything in Wolf TNC, and I was thinking, oh God, how poor is the Switch version going to be? And then I was surprised at how awesome it runs in comparison to Doom. So they did some good work. Yeah.
So it's an impressive showing there. And I guess the last thing to really discuss then, some of the gameplay stuff and some of the, well, actually no. Before we get to that, I did have to mention these environments here where they sort of start to tease some of the other areas you'll go to, right? Which I think you also said this, that they look decidedly more Quake-like.
I think
not.
Yes. I mean, they're castles and whatnot. There were castles in other versions, in certain levels of Doom, that have this concrete masonry look.
It's true.
But at the same time, the specific wording in the presentation of never places you haven't been before in a Doom game, is it at someplace we've been in some other id game before? I don't know. That's what I kept thinking. I just kept imagining the Ranger popping up in the footage at some point.
I mean, we have absolutely no idea about this, but man, that would be the ultimate crossover. Especially he shows up.
I would just love a fist bump or something like that between the Doomslayer and the Ranger. It would be so good.
The Doomslayer, Ranger, the Predator.
The
scene. That's what we need in this.
The arm slam. Oh my God, it would be so good. Yeah, I mean, I was acting pretty fanboyishly over the presentation in terms of like other those environments that we were seeing later on that mix this clean, high tech kind of Giger-esque look to them, which we've seen in Doom before, but it honestly does remind me way more of Quake usually these days. And then the possibility that we'll be going to other places, maybe in the solar system for all we know, because they're already on Phobos again. I have no idea where they're going to take it. If it's going to be anything like Doom 2016, it's going to be zany. We're going to go places where we probably didn't think we were going to go. This is definitely going to be more over the top. And the gameplay mechanics kind of show how much more over the top it's going to be. Like, there's the double jump like before, and it looks like there's like a double dash as well, kind of like Shadow Warrior 2013 like.
Yeah, they seem to use that a lot, actually.
Yeah, like just darting all over the place through the air. And of course, the thing that I loved a lot was the grappling hook.
Yeah, the grapple shotgun thing.
Yeah,
or the grapple hook in general looks unbelievably cool. Plus, they also added the bar swinging.
Oh my god, I completely forgot about that. Or the wall climbing too.
Yes, the wall climbing,
which kind of is a bit like old. What was it? Wolfenstein, the New Blood.
Ooh, it's been a while. I can't remember.
Either way, there's been these things have been introduced into id Tech 5 gameplay before. Or even id Tech 6 maybe, but seeing them in a Doom game where you already have such incredible control of your character, and then just, here's some more control, by the way. I'm super excited.
It's kind of funny too, because for all the similarities to classic Doom, that's one area where it differs greatly. Yeah. Especially verticality.
Yeah, I mean, not everything's infinite height in Doom Eternal, so we should be pretty happy about that.
Plus, no stages where they just set the key on a pedestal right in front of you. You're just like, well, there it is. I can't get it.
There was a moment that actually reminded me of classic Doom, but it was with a new element that I'm used to seeing from Wolfenstein, which was the one-up. The Doomslayer picks up a one-up at some point, completely unexplained, by the way. There's no explanation in the footage what it does. But as soon as he jumps on the pedestal with the one-up, it lowers in like classic Doom fashion. For the reason of just because it's Doom, there's pedestals and they lower. And
how about the plasma gun?
Oh God, I love it.
That I absolutely love it. That is dead on. That's how I always envisioned it.
Yeah, it looks. I really hope they have the classic pose like they introduced with the Doom patch, where you can center the weapon, because it's gonna just make that that plasma gun look so good. There was a lot of other little throwbacks that we were talking about, like the Archvile and the Mancubus now looking much more like the original Doom Mancubus or Mancubi. Yeah. I don't know, whatever. They're going in the direction. They know what they're doing now. They don't have to kind of make the aesthetic of the game recall other things that we're used to. This is just going to look like Doom, and it's awesome. I'm super excited. Jeez. One little detail that I really loved was when the Doomslayer took out the super shotgun and looked at the grappling hook on the underside of it. There was like this tuning fork kind of sound as it like retracted and opened.
Please remain calm.
God, like the thing is that I noticed in the Doom 2016 is it had a great soundtrack, but some of the gun sounds in the game were a bit muffled. And this time, everything was very clear between the machine gun now or the super shotgun, which had like a crack boom to it that you're used to. Everything just sounded much better. I did like the sounds in Doom 2016, but this time around, the mix seems to be much clearer and emphasizing, oh, you're firing now, and oh, the enemy's taking damage. Just like a lot of little nuanced things that looked better.
Yeah, and then one other thing I really liked is during the presentation, I might be wrong, but I thought my ears were hearing what sounded like a remix of E1M8 from the original Doom, Phobos Anomaly.
Yeah, I think it definitely was.
Wonder what that is. We love our little hint. Honestly, we're just huge lore nerds at id. And everything we do has a story behind it.
I'm pretty sure you're right. I found myself bobbing my head unconsciously throughout the entirety of the footage, like when he is on Phobos, like I was realizing like, oh my gosh, I'm moving with Doomslayer. This the Mick Gordon soundtrack this time around, if it's anything like the last one, is just gonna blow our socks off.
Gosh, Alex, we don't do this that often. But we're just kind of geeking out over this game, man. I honestly can't help it because I really, really like Doom 2016.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited for this.
I'm going to be completely psyched out. And I look forward to seeing what technologically is different over time. They did a great presentation post Doom 2016 coming out about the rendering changes under the hood. And I hope we get some more light into it this time around as well.
Yeah, I definitely am looking forward and hoping for additional details on what they're doing here, especially pre-release, just to get a better understanding of what's changed and what they're doing this time around, because as we've said, it looks phenomenal. But I think that is probably going to do it for now, Alex. So thanks for joining me today to just talk about Doom Eternal.
Anytime, John, anytime.
And if you enjoyed this video, as always, be sure to like, subscribe, ring that bell up there in the corner, since that always helps out our channel. And of course, follow us over on Twitter. And until next time, keep playing Doom.